Hi everybody, Life with Aaron, and I'm here with you in Pulaski, Tennessee at the Sherwood Park Amphitheater. I'm here to talk about the namesake of this town, Casimir Pulaski, or Casimir Pulaski as we say in America. Now for nearly 300 years we thought we knew the man that is Casimir Pulaski, and there's a documentary that's getting ready to drop tomorrow nationwide that is going to blow the lid completely off who we thought Mr. Pulaski was. He's been called the father of American cavalry, a hero in two nations, both in Poland and the United States. We thought we knew everything, but there's so much more to know about the man. So before we talk about this current controversy, let's get to know the man. Stay with me a few minutes, and I promise you'll learn something. Casimir Pulaski was born in 1745 in Warsaw, Poland. His family, being of nobility and with a steep interest in politics, that would soon be taken up by young Casimir. Finding himself increasingly involved in military matters in the Lithuanian-Poland Commonwealth, Pulaski would find himself as one of the top commanders in the Bar Confederation and their continued resistance to Russian domination of the Commonwealth. Although stoic and tenacious in tactics, eventually the cause was lost. Casimir Pulaski, now exiled, no longer had a country. By 1776, Count Pulaski had sent word back to the Polish government wanting to come home. After hearing no response, he turned his sights to the Continental Army and the recent victories being had by George Washington. In France, he sought a visit with Benjamin Franklin through friends and through an association with the Marquis de Lafayette. The visit went well. Franklin was impressed and sent word of recommendation with Pulaski to America. Thoroughly impressed by the intellect and daring of the young cavalryman, Benjamin Franklin put his full support behind him in a note to Washington. Although something that Pulaski could not have foreseen, nearly 100 foreigners were trying to compete for spots within the Continental Army. The soon-to-be Brigadier General Casimir Pulaski would not have long to wait. In the waning moments of the Battle of Brandywine, he would be called upon to defend the rear guard of Washington's troops. Had he not been successful, there is a good chance General George Washington would have been captured by the British. Newly minted Brigadier General Casimir Pulaski would form his own Pulaski Legion. He would reform the cavalry of the complete Continental Army. And as he had done in his native Poland, he would serve with honor and distinction until his final battle, at the Battle of Savannah, where he fell from his horse, mortally wounded. The Battle of Savannah, also known as the Siege of Savannah, in 1779, was one of the bloodiest of the Revolutionary War. With the loss of General Pulaski, the American resolve was lost, and Savannah would remain in the hands of British control until 1783, the waning moments of the war itself. Because of the chaotic way that someone can be buried during a time of war, there came two schools of thought when it came to the death of Casimir Pulaski. A, that he was potentially buried at sea, or B, that he was buried in Savannah, and the current place that is highlighted by several different monuments, including this impressive obelisk, is indeed where he was buried. For 226 years, this would be a mystery. For some, like the Poles themselves, they didn't care. The Polish government viewed him as a hero. The American government viewed him as a hero, even if the body in his grave was not his. The man's deeds still stood. But in 1996, scientists had the opportunity, because of the decaying nature of the monument itself, to try and extract a DNA sequence and to tie that to relatives that they had been able to identify in Poland. For 8 long years, they worked to do just that. But unfortunately, in 2004, they had to announce inconclusive results. So we have several situations that lead to the body being in a very poor shape. For instance, the body was hastily put in the ground. It was a time of war. Then many years later, it was moved to a more stable coffin. And then Casimir Pulaski is going to get something that he was never able to have back in 1779.
Upon the rededication of the grave of General Pulaski, he was given full military honors. Many people talked about the great contributions of this man who was a hero really the world over, but especially in Poland and in the United States of America. He had given the ultimate sacrifice for liberty itself. He would fight for it in his own country. He would go across the world to fight for it in ours. We laid him to rest for a proper hero's death.
He fought for 2 years in both the North and the South for American liberty. In October 1779, he was killed at the Battle of Savannah in an attempt to save a faltering American attack on the city. He led a cavalry charge into the British lines. It was to cost him his life. One of his great opponents in Poland, the King of Poland, Stanisław August, who was almost kidnapped by Pulaski, said of him, "He died as he lived, a great hero."
So some of the things that had been identified by the scientists is that the body was specific with the proportions that had been mentioned at the time. Male, mid-30s, between 5'2" and 5'4". The nameplate on the coffin itself, Brigadier General Casimir Pulaski. And also the theory of the burial at sea was only put forward because of one of Pulaski's legion, a Frenchman, actually had been telling that story throughout his life, that he had been buried at sea, that the person in the tomb was not Casimir Pulaski. That was determined to be false. Ways that they determined this: injuries that were consistent.
As the scientists and forensic anthropologists had looked at the body back in the late 90s, they were able to determine injuries consistent with that had happened to General Pulaski. A broken nose, a broken eye socket, a benign tumor behind the cheek, an injury to the forehead that had occurred in his days fighting in Russia, missing teeth that were consistent with accounts at the time, and also on the right hand, broken fingers, consistent with Casimir Pulaski's direct account of being unable to write for some time after sustaining an injury. This was the body of a person who had endured multiple injuries in hand-to-hand combat. Based on this overwhelming evidence, they were able to come to the conclusion that this was indeed Casimir Pulaski. The next part would remain secret until 2019. Researchers had made additional findings in the research between 1996 and 2004 that had not been made public until now. In trying to find a DNA sequence to be able to match Casimir Pulaski with his relatives in Poland, painstaking detail was paid to every single piece of evidence that they had. One of the things that researchers noted was an enlarged pituitary gland, which is responsible for regulating hormones in the body. This pituitary gland, they theorized, was sending out male hormones to account for a lack of the stress hormone in the body, along with things like smaller ridges most often seen in female skulls. In addition, the hips of the skeleton were widened as that of a female. For all intents and purposes, the skeletal remains were those of a female. It was the finding of the researchers that Casimir Pulaski more than likely had a disorder known as congenital adrenal hyperplasia. This is a rare disorder and affects less than 200,000 cases per year. In this situation, there is a genetic defect in the adrenal glands, causing an overproduction of male hormones. It is quite possible that Casimir Pulaski was a biological female, but that the pituitary gland was sending out enough male hormone that things like facial hair and an overabundance of testosterone would have been present. Additional information was found that Casimir Pulaski was baptized at home as a male. But it is key that it was at home with a disability listed only that the child was unable to go into the church, and no further details were used. So where does that leave us today? Is Casimir Pulaski less a hero? No. Will this faze the Polish people in any way? Not at all. Casimir Pulaski was a hero, and he'll remain a hero. 240 years on, that remains the same. We will continue to celebrate General Casimir Pulaski in Poland and in America, in festivals, on Casimir Pulaski Day in Illinois in March every year. He is commemorated on bridges, streets, cities, towns, and even counties. And nothing will change that. And now even a former U.S. cruiser, now a member of the Polish fleet, proudly bears the name Pulaski. Casimir Pulaski is as well known now as he was in his own day. I would even say more so. And that's a good thing. So we get another chance to say goodbye to a person that gave so much to this country. Male, female, intersex. It didn't matter to Casimir Pulaski. And it doesn't matter to you. Whoever you are, however you want to live your life, do it to the best of your ability and let no one stand in your way. That was Casimir Pulaski's America, and it's yours today.
I write you a story, but it loses its thread, and all of my witnesses keep turning up dead. I paint you a picture of Pulaski at night. Come back to Chicago, city of light. Come back to Chicago.